The
It's
approach that
fine.
I
Just hit
had,
record.
the approach that I had when I did my podcast was as soon as people come in, boom, record. Why? Because otherwise, what I've always noticed is that there's like a good amount of like chemistry building in the beginning. There's like a good energy that gets kind of unleashed. And then by the time we start, some of that had fizzled out. And I wanted to capture it and bottle it as soon as possible. And so I didn't, and also I didn't want to make it people.
I see
Have you
chemistry
noticed
kind of
something?
build over time as well, though. I mean, I think some of it's too a little bit of a comfort to being on camera. I also like interviewing people who don't normally get interviewed, as well as people who do, you know. So I think that we overplay uh, the existence of some voices and underplay the existence of others. And like even people that I think anyone that you would know would regard as stupid, and honestly, like it's not unfounded if you actually have a conversation with these type of people. Like, I mean, for real, they're smarter than you think. It's just they're
Yeah,
not smart in the same things you're smart in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
The
think
world
that's
takes all
definitely.
types of people, man.
Who do you like to talk to?
I mean, I'm just my biggest interest always is mind changes. Um I'm generally like my personal like hyper like focus interest is praxeology, which is the study of human action. And so like to me it's like created this like joy in being a human behaviorist, if that makes any sense.
Do you like to see how other people change their minds, or like, do you like?
Correct.
Okay, and
Correct. I
have
like to
you?
see what causes people to change their mind, how they work through cognitive dissonance. That whole, you know, beautiful action in and of itself is just something to me that's interesting, and it's very and it doesn't matter kind of which way they change it. Like I think, you know, just that idea, it's like, well, how did you go from this thought process to this process? You know?
Do you remember times that you changed your mind?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, about a lot of things. I used to be a hardcore anti like any kind of communism, Marxists or Satan, whatever, you know. A buddy of mine introduced me to a gentleman named Kropotkin, who now I affectionately call Commie Santa. If you look at him, it makes sense. If you look a picture of him up, he's an interesting guy because like when you actually start listening to what he's saying, he's kind of saying like, look, I'm not saying everybody's a communist. I'm saying that communists, you know, if done voluntarily, communism would work because all the people would be bought in. And he's actually arguing with the other Marxists, the more people who are saying that we need a dictatorship of the proletariat. And he's saying to them, he's like, look, if you try to force people who are not bought into into this system,
Hmm.
they're going to try to manipulate it and try to use it for profit because they're not bought into the same ideology that we are. So it's a situation that you necessarily need people to buy into the process or else the process doesn't work. And I think that it was a pretty interesting mind change for me because it was just kind of like I don't know, it's I don't think it's the best way, but it's not an unreasonable way to live life. So if that's what you want to do, isn't that what freedom is about? And so I kind of have more of a more bottom unity aspect of things. It's kind of like, hey, as long as you're just wanting to do your own thing, I don't really care what it is you want to do.
So, what do you attribute the mind changing then to? Was it the fact that you didn't consider it from that angle, and that was a critical angle, and that once somebody
That's a
showed,
lot of it.
and once somebody just pointed it out, you're like, oh, now I understand it. So it's just that you didn't think about it sufficiently
But I
broadly.
think there's
What was it?
something I think there's something to a level of openness that I had when this was considered that I didn't have before. And
Mm.
then there's the instance of like my actual anti-war transformation. I used to be like, I'm a libertarian on everything,
Yeah.
but like, let's not be crazy. We need to be able to fight if somebody wants to fight us. Like, that was like my principled view of everything. I was like, yeah, if anything we have, it's military and police. Like, of course, that makes sense. But it's just, you know, uh, uh, a man named Dave Smith came and started telling me about some angles from like a guy named Scott Horton, and in both cases, I think really the honest truth is I never gave these ideas their fair shot.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It was almost like an innate, like reflexive kind of rejection. Or
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. So I have experienced cognitive dissonance, and personally I've done it, and it's like I don't know. I almost don't understand how it worked even within myself.
I used to think that you always change your mind behind your back. And it's like you're never quite putting your finger on the thing. Like it changes. It's like you go to sleep and then you wake up just a little bit different. And it's never such a drastic change. It's not like you take off one pair of eyeglasses and then you put on the other one. You're like, actually, I could see much better with these ones. And then you keep them on. I don't think it's like that. I think it tends to be much more gradual. And oftentimes I believe it happens in conversation where or at least this is something that I've noticed. It's like now you're put in a different situation and you're able to almost argue against a person in a way that somebody else had argued with you, and now you're just almost like adopting this new framework and conveying it, and at some point it starts to bake into your identity and how you actually see things internally, not just how you convey them externally. Maybe it starts out externally. This is why I'm such a big fan of conversation, because I believe a lot of mind changing is happening in the exchange of ideas between people.
This is why I also think that there's something to being aggressive and like again, I'm a praxeologist. If you want people to do things, you have to reward the thing that you want them to do,
Hmm.
right? So there has to be an incentive structure. And there is something that's a little interesting and weird, and maybe it's a leftover piece of our tribal nature as human beings that like when somebody does change their mind and then comes over to your perspective, mind camp, right? There is this like reflexive, are you sure you're on our side? I don't
Hmm.
know if you're really on our side. You weren't really on our side before. How can we trust you? And it's just, I don't know. There is something to, it's like, I said this about like Kyle Rittenhouse, is I was saying that like when you had a situation where this kid, I don't know, I watched the video pretty obviously this kid did nothing wrong.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It was pretty obvious, but then you had this situation where everything was framed within this certain realm to where he gets out of all of this and it's like nobody wants to talk to him but the neo-Nazis. And so he just kind of full tilts into that, and it's just like that's you know when you shut somebody down to where there is no real escape, if that makes sense. There is no incentive to come out of what you have done. You know what I mean? This is I think something in at least my religion, that's the whole point of like repentance and then forgiveness, is it's
Right.
like there's that creates the incentive structure for you to move forward and do better
Yeah.
instead of to stay, well, I mean, I'm already lost, so why not stay lost.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways I don't know if my older brother ever forgave me for renouncing our Marxism, you know, our teenage Marxism. And he, because I think I don't know if he's going to listen to this, but when we were both sharing a very kind of, we were fellow travelers in that ideology for a while, we had almost, it was like a heyday. It was like a honeymoon in our brotherhood. You know what I mean? And we were just cut from the same cloth all of a sudden in like a very deep and meaningful way. And then when I began to renounce it and drifted into a different place, more into the praxeology space that I got into, I think he felt betrayed. And I mean, we're good now. I mean, it's not, I mean, we're fine. But
I think there's a little bit of a similar issue with my father because, like, my dad is a Marine. So, like, when I'm telling him, like, no, actually, I think these wars were all BS and they sent you over there for a whole lot of nothing. You know what I mean? It's not great for him to hear, and I think he
yeah.
has a large incentive structure for him to not believe it. You know, but and I get it, and it's not that I don't respect what he did. I think it was brave, and I think he had all the right intentions, and I'm not, I don't judge the military for a lot for what the leaders tell them to do. You know what I mean? I know that like a lot of people hate the just following orders argument, but I think there is a little something to that.
Mm,
Now, I mean, it doesn't justify anything you do. You know what I mean? If we're talking about specific acts, but if it's just like they invaded Iraq, well, they're just following orders. Yeah, that's a fair argument because like you're the military, you do what your commander says in that instance. If it's you slaughtered a village full of children, then no, just following orders
mm.
isn't a fair argument there. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation. I mean, it's I know it's not conciliatory to a lot of different folks, and a lot of people don't like to hear these kind of things, but
Yeah, I guess what would it look like for you to build a military culture that doesn't follow orders? I don't know if that's what does the
yeah,
alternative
how
look
can you have a military like it's
like?
just it doesn't like if we're all being honest, man, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And to a large extent, I do think that like until you're talking about war crimes,
Yeah.
we're not. It is kind of a fair argument that no, I signed up. The contract said 6 years. I mean, I'm here. I got to do what I said. I said I was going to do.
Do
You know.
you have you had any experiences with people from the armed forces having changed their minds?
Oh yeah,
What
I've
was that
met
like?
quite a few. Like it's actually if you actually look at the polls, it's insanely common. What's actually kind of interesting is like if you go back, you can go back to 2008,
Hmm.
and in 2008, the number one fundraiser from the United States active duty military, right? The
Hmm.
number one fundraiser was Ron Paul and his president because he was saying we need to end all of this and come home.
Right.
And that's in 2008. That's only like 6 years into it, like when the entire Republican Party was like, you're with us or you're with the terrorists. So I think that was a really interesting, thing where if you go and you asked, it was a very interesting moment too, in my opinion, because if you asked if you asked the military would tell you we need to end this war.
Hmm.
But if you asked the people were like, no, we need to fight this war.
Yeah, I'm listening to the Obama memoir right now. Have you read it?
No.
It's pretty good. It's better than I thought, and it's although I think it started out a little slow. It took me some time to get into it, but he narrates it himself, and so it's a delicious voice, right? And so he right now I'm at the
He's a good orator. I'll give him that.
I mean, in his voice is I mean he knows how to he's very eloquent, and he writes even more beautifully than he speaks. So it's shockingly literary.
That's because he didn't write it, dude.
I was trying to figure out, it's like, how did he really like spend all the time writing? And I think it took him. I think they were
No, they definitely have help. I
for
don't
sure.
think they're writing that on their own. I wouldn't write it on my own if I was at that position.
He must
I'd
have
be
at
too
least a
afraid to.
ghostwriter.
No, I don't even mean ghostwriter completely. I mean like even if I wrote the book, I'd be like, hey man, you're a way better right. Can you just like read this and then make it
Chat
better?
GPT it a little bit. Even beyond that, because like it took them, I think it took him much longer than any other president to come up with a memoir. I think it tends to be like a year or so. And for him, I think it was like three and a half years. But I think one
Like I
easy
said, I
way.
just respect a man who actually writes their own book. I don't know if he did or not, but I know a lot of these folks have their books written for them, and I'm just like, and all they did was sit down for an interview with a guy, and then he wrote the book for them, and then they put their name on it. I'm like, man, that's just
I think one way to tell, and I think it could be a pretty easy way. I mean, for sure, he's had a bunch of help on this. It's a very long book, and it's just part one. And this is so far. I think it's by the time you're done with the book, it's he's just going to be talking about I think like the capture of Osama bin Laden, and he you can tell, I presume, if you were to compare this writing with the writing of his other books when he was just starting to run for office, when he was just even before he was like a senator, and maybe like a state senator. I suspect he didn't have access to as many ghostwriters back then. So I
he
think
was working for the CIA then, though.
the Indonesian CIA. So he talks about it's very interesting because right now he's talking about the early moments of the moments that built up his relationship with the security establishment and what that did to him and to his thinking. Did it make him more conservative? All of a sudden, was he not quite as revolutionary as he thought he might have been or that he will have been? And it's fascinating because he says that exactly what you're saying. Very often, it was the army and the military writ large that was just saying, actually, let's not do XYZ. Let's be a little bit more cautious. And it was the politicians that are saying, no, we're going to do this anyway. Let's do this because the people are clamoring for XYZ. And I see a similar thing happening now in Israel, right? Like it's happening in Gaza. I think for the most part, the military establishment is quite resistant to it.
But that's the thing is what the hell is a leader for? If it's not to say, hey guys, y'all, I understand your pain, but we got to do this correct.
So
We
how do
have
you
a
balance?
world to worry about. We have a world we have to live in. Blowback is real. You know what I mean? You have to. I don't know.
How do you balance being a okay? So you said leader. That's interesting because I think we can unpack the word politician or the role of politician into perhaps a leader or perhaps a representative of its public, right? So like you wouldn't want them to never do what the public said. How do I reconcile? And this is something I've never really thought about in these terms before. But how there's two concepts here. One is you want a politician that represents their constituents and their beliefs, right? And on the other hand, you want someone who will be a leader who can represent their interests, which might go against their existing beliefs and their existing needs and their demand. And so at the same time, you don't want
Well,
them to run too wild by, you know,
see, this is
turn,
this
yeah,
is the argument why we don't have a democracy and why have a republic.
right. But
You
you're
can't let the mob run over the smart decision. The point of electing the wise leader is so the leader goes, "Hey, look, I know this might be what you guys' interest is now, and I think it's going to be a fleeting interest because you're upset and angry. This is emotional at the moment." And instead of taking advantage of your emotions, which is manipulative, which is what you see out of George W. Bush and what you see out of a lot of people in the Obama administration during this time, and what you see out of Benjamin Netanyahu currently. You're manipulating that emotion to go further than what you could do if you were to just go, hey, look, I'm the adult in the room, which is apparently what you're selling yourself as the government. I'm the adult in the room, and I'm not going to keep throwing, crap. I'm going to sit down and honestly have this discussion with the people who want to have peace, and I'm going to go and send the military in a targeted way after the people who don't. But the thing is like, if you like for me, if you go with the 9/11 and that whole operation, it should have ended in Tora Bora.
Yeah, no, but
Mm.
it's just it's. I think it's still leaving the hard questions on the table. Where it's like, okay, sure, you can identify those situations where the politicians have led their publics astray, but how do you create a system where if the people want, I don't know, healthcare, you don't have politicians that say, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's a fleeting interest. Really, what's good for you is something else, right? Like, how do you nevertheless hold them accountable? And you want to have leaders that are both leading and reflecting. Ideally, you don't want leaders that are, or you don't want politicians that are exploiting the public's whims and making them worse, which is what I see
Yeah, and I
the
hear what
problem
you're
being right.
saying, but if we're going to be honest with ourselves, when they say screw you to the public's interest and do what they want and say we're the leaders is when they want to do another war. And when they say, oh, it's fleeting, we're the leaders, trust us, it's not a good idea, is when we're talking about things like healthcare.
No,
So,
that's
like,
true.
the way
But
that
I
this
want to come up
actually
with it.
plays out is the opposite of the way that it's supposed to play out. And I think that's not an accident. That's why I'm a libertarian.
Yeah, I just don't know how you. We have to design a single standard and then hold them to that standard. And I think that's I haven't yet thought deeply enough to know what that standard should be. When should they go against what the public wants?
Like I said, it's about, again, when it's wrapped in emotion. This is it's not about what I'm getting at is like when you're getting into war fever and things like that, those are fleeting moments in a nation's history. The idea that, like, you know, say if we're talking about, let's go through our actual history, the US's history. If we're talking about ending slavery, that wasn't a fleeting moment. This was an issue the entire time the American colonies existed, and then it culminated there. Does that make sense? What you're talking about is the difference between a long-term issue and an issue that just popped up because of a reaction to a circumstance that's currently going on. That is what a leader is supposed to understand, is when it is time to, react, and when it is time to say, hey guys, we have to calm down and we have to assess the situation and we have to address it correctly. Because if we overreact and we overcompensate, we will cause more problems in the end, which is universally what we end up having.
Yes, although I think that still is the easy problems. The hard problems are when the president or the politicians have to confront things that do happen very quickly and they have to react very quickly. So, for example, let's say like COVID, right? So, COVID have you could say that they need to be rational and cool-headed, and that take their time and patient. Fine, the public is also freaking out. So, should they do what
Well,
the
that's
public wants,
exactly the point. It's
or
just
no, the
like,
public shouldn't?
this is kind of the point that, like, I'm kind of getting at, is like when you have fleeting moments like that, it's like the government's role isn't to come out and try to scare you more. When you
No,
have Anthony Fauci on record saying he thinks that the people aren't scared enough of COVID.
wait, no, but
You
that's
know what I'm saying?
wait, no, but that
So,
wait, no, but that doesn't mean they're not scared enough for me to pass my agenda. They're not scared enough given how scared
well,
they
that's
should
not the
be.
point. The point I'm making is you shouldn't want people to be fearful. You should want people to be cautious. Those are different things. Because one is about panic and one is about knowledge. And especially if your job is the head scientist meant to come out here and explain to us what is going on, and you're telling us that you don't know where this stuff is coming from after the fact, it just kind of sort of appeared. I was just saying what these other guys were saying. It's like your job was to be able to explain to us what was going on. That's what your job was, and you failed. What you instead did, by your own admission, was try to make people as scared as possible. And that, in my opinion, is not what a leader does. What he should have done is come out and said, "Look, this is what the virus is. These are the type of people that are most susceptible to this. These are the recommendations that I think make sense, and here's why they make sense." When people started pushing back, instead of demonizing these folks, he should have said, "Hey, look, this is why the science says what the science says."
Honey
But like
Badger,
I said, it's just
but let's
it's
unpack
less of an adversarial, more of an explanatory,
100%.
tone.
Even in that case, so let's take the example, let's say, of like an asteroid coming to hit Earth, right? And people are busy because they don't really care because they're on TikTok, and TikTok is fun, yes, but the asteroid is about to hit you guys, and it's going to kill all of us, and we need to do something about it. Is there a role, do you think, of leaders to actually scare people into understanding the level of threat that they are under in order to avert it?
Well, if we're talking about leaders, and I know I'm kind of nitpicking your example, but to nitpick your example, like there's nothing the people could do about an asteroid.
No,
That
let's
would
say
be
they
something
can.
leaders would do.
They
Leaders would do
can,
on their
Bruce
own, but
Willis.
just to nitpick your example, I'm just I'm being a jerk. But I get what you're kind of getting at. You're saying that, but what if there is an emergency situation that the
And the
leaders
people are
do have
asleep.
to
Yeah,
react,
the
and the
people are asleep.
people are asleep?
Honestly, bro. Here, I'll give you another example. Like, I think right now, it could be the case that what Israeli, I wouldn't say like politicians, cultural influencers, whatever. Maybe it's a good idea for them to scare the Israeli public into thinking. I don't know if this is true, and it doesn't matter where I fall on the political perspective here, but for them to think that if what's happening in the West Bank continues unabated, they're going to have a one-state solution and the complete destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. So if they want to preserve Israel as a Jewish state, they should give the Palestinians their own state ASAP. As soon as they can, they should do it in order to preserve the demographic majority for Jews in the state of Israel as it exists today. I think that could you make the argument that the Israeli public is sleepwalking into that type of reality that would not be to their advantage, and what is necessary is to shake them up, even if it's through fear?
I I don't think there's anything wrong with a realistic level of fear at something that could, or worry. But the point I'm making is like I don't think it should be drummed up. It's kind of like if we're talking about Russia Ukraine, right? I think it's a good example. It's something that numerous of my, crew of the anti-war folks have been sounding the alarm of, like, truthfully, the worst thing that could happen to the world is
Mm,
the United States and Russia going to war.
mm,
And it is definitely the worst. Like that is 90% of the world's nuclear arsenal at war with each other.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, this is something that could end the world.
yeah.
And there is a proper level of respect that should be had to that. It doesn't seem there is that respect to that.
Mm. Are you saying that to the
But
point? Yeah,
but you know, at the end of the day, we still have to have a reasonable discussion and actually illustrate that point through knowledge. We don't just go,
that's right.
"Hey,
That's
bunch of nukes scary," and then in the discussion.
Yeah.
That's
Eh,
kind of
but I think that if we could probably both agree on, you shouldn't, you should never inflate or exaggerate the empirical reality in order to drive fear. If
that's
talking
a
about
lot of
the
what I'm saying, yeah.
empirical reality induces fear, that is fine so long as the fear matches the level of actual risk. And the level of fear shouldn't exceed the level of actual risk, and
Correct.
certainly shouldn't exceed beyond simply for political gain.
Correct. That's kind of what I'm saying. You shouldn't be added in an incitement to fear.
Yeah.
But if things are scary, things are scary. And
Yeah.
I do actually think that that's one of the interesting thing to me with talking to a lot of different Israelis throughout the group and head on and thing is that I don't think that they recognize that threat that you're talking about. It's like
Right.
the threat of the propaganda war. If
Mm.
you lose, if Israel loses the support that they have internationally, they
Yeah.
really are screwed. There is
So
not
have
there's
you
not many options there.
have you spoken to a lot of Israelis before you joined the community?
Not really.
Yeah. What's been your
Mostly
impression then? Kind of like, yeah, both like, yeah, what have you been surprised by and disappointed by?
I'm not as surprised by a lot of this thought process because like I said, I have seen a lot I listened to as I recommend to everyone the Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem podcast where it just really went through that. So and also personal study into a lot of this history. So to me, a lot of these kind of sentiments aren't really that surprising.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like while I think that I think that a lot of friends of mine that especially a lot of Zionist, like American Zionists, would be insanely surprised by what they would hear from a lot of these kind of folks. Because I think what's kind of really interesting is the impression that people in America have of Israelis versus what reality actually is,
Mm.
if that makes any sense.
That in reality they are more what?
I would say they're a lot more conservative and right wing than and less liberal democracy, than they believe, and they're proud of it. And I don't, that's the thing is for me is like I don't actually fault people for having different views,
Huh.
and I actually give a lot of congratulations to people who are honest about their views, and that's really the problem that I have hugely about a lot of these kind of people who are talking for, a lot of times the Israeli government to our media, and they're saying, no, 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 Israelis don't believe this. And I'm like, you're just lying. Just say what it is that people believe. And this is why we have the pressure on our government to do the things that we're doing. You know what I mean? Like this is a different
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like to me, I can't. I have a lot of disrespect for anything that's fundamentally dishonest.
I'll tell you what has been surprising to me. So it's I think Israelis are more radical today than they've ever been. I don't think that what you see right now is representative of how Israeli mentality had always been. I don't think that's
I
true.
don't think that either,
Yeah.
as well, because like I said, and I get it. Like again, I went
Yeah.
through nine. I was a kid when 9/11 happened, so
Yeah. So exactly. So like conflict radicalizes people, right? So I just see I see the society in many ways as in need of healing, right? And the Palestinian society for sure as well, right? Like how would they not come out scarred and sick and wounded from decades of conflict that looks like this? People would object to my use of the word conflict. Plug in whatever word you want. You know, they've been in awful circumstances for the last few decades. The Israelis too, right? So of course, and beyond that, both peoples are carrying emotional, generational trauma and baggage that is making it even more difficult to see the reality for what it is.
yeah, that's what I was saying. I think it was Altoids. I was saying to him was what's interesting to me is the level of similarity between both stories
Mm.
and the lack of ability to identify with each other given that
Yeah, so
reality.
I think it's, and I think there's a concept in conflict resolution, mimetic, like conflict resolution or something, mimetic conflict. I think it's when two groups are in conflict with one another, they start to look alike. So everything, even like the tactics and their ideologies and the narratives, somehow these things begin to mirror one another. Right? We should look into that. We can pull it up. The the thing that I
Yeah.
have been,
Somebody was asking, why would the Palestinians be so upset about being expelled rather than not just being, it's not like they were being killed like in the Holocaust. And I was like, oh, so there was nothing wrong with what Spain did then. They just wanted a nice white Spanish nation. So
yeah,
there's
no, but
nothing wrong. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
no,
of
I remember,
course
like,
there's something wrong with that.
well, but
Yeah.
like, I think for that conversation in particular, the claim is, what do you have to pick genocide or ethnic cleansing? You have to pick. That's what's on offer. And obviously Palestinians will disagree. Many people will disagree that that actually wasn't what's on offer, but it wasn't a
Yeah.
justification of ethnic cleansing and expulsion a priori because it's good to create a pure state. It's because it came about through exigencies of war, and if you don't have that, you're gonna get all your people killed. So tough luck shouldn't have started a war that you can't win. And if you try to annihilate my people, you're gonna need to leave. So I feel like that's kind of where it's coming from. I'll tell you for the most part, what has been impressive to me. So we started this project, and through the
But
course,
yeah, that just to point out that one thing, it's like if you want to annihilate my people, you need to leave. Think about that statement and then understand the from the river to the sea and the similarity there.
yeah, 100%, 100.
That's kind of my point is the
No,
level of
100%.
rhyming there is it's just like yeah, like that's why yeah, the
And yeah,
feeling
and
is
the
so
similarity goes
mutual
deeper.
in such a way that's it's so interesting.
Yeah, that I think you're it's brilliant to notice that. I think there's another plane along which this plays. You could say Israelis don't want Palestinians to get the right of return because it will change the demographic nature of the land and will completely turn upside down the nature of their society. That's the same argument that Palestinians were making in the 1920s. It's
And why the white papers happened.
at that point the Palestinians were no, why should we accept this mass migration of Jews from Europe? They don't share our values. They don't share our culture, and they're going to change our society in a way we dislike. The exact same thing that Israelis are saying today. So the thing that is interesting to me is that when I speak to many Israelis, there is a way to get to them, and they open their minds and they listen and they often change their mind. And I have been consistently impressed with, I'll just call it the level of human talent that I find there. That you would think that in a moment like this, at a time like this, they would be as so close minded and not open to any conversation.
Very,
And
very smart people. I will definitely say that.
it's, it just gives me so much hope. You know what I mean? Every conversation, these are not easy conversations. And I won't say that everybody can have those conversations. It's not like they're open to it through anybody, but there are ways to have those conversations in a way where they open up and they listen attentively and they're open to changing their mind, or at least open to considering another perspective. And I have seen this consistently with virtually every Israeli I've ever met. And maybe I've met a very small selection of them. Fine. But of that selection, by and large, many of them are very open to new ideas. In fact, I think they're not even very
Yeah.
ideological. I think they're not
That's
even very
something that
political.
I've noticed in contrast to a lot of people. It's like you will meet Republicans and Democrats in America that are more sturdy and
Mm,
stubborn in their views than some of these people who have some of the most radical views that I've seen in
yeah,
politics.
yeah,
And it's just like where they'll be like, no, this is what I believe. Well, actually, that's a good point. You know what I mean? I'm like, whoa, this is kind
yeah.
of interesting.
I
And I don't know if it's a cultural thing because I do know that there's a long Jewish culture of this debate within the religion that has this is why you see a lot of Jewish politicians that's supposedly a conspiracy, but it's just
I'm not sure if
lawyers as
that.
well. It's just a debate, is a huge part of the culture.
Yeah, that might be the case. I don't know. When I speak to Palestinians, they say, "No, we have this too. This isn't exclusively Jewish." So I certainly see it among Jews.
That's something that I've noticed too is a very, very hyper intelligent like culture that also prioritizes like knowledge. You know, you need to be a journalist, you need to be a doctor, you need to be something,
Yeah, yeah,
smart. You can't, no, don't waste your life doing something stupid. Go be smart, you
yeah.
know?
I think there's. I also I don't we don't want to be cavalier and think that it's here to stay. I don't know if it's here to stay. It could be that that disposition is going to decay. And I'm sure that it used to be more pronounced even a few years ago, and certainly a couple of generations ago, maybe. But at this point, we still have some remnant of it. And I think there's a potential, there's a window. We can get into that, get in through that window, and drive change. And that gives me a lot of hope. I'm not seeing a lot of people leverage that window, but I think it's still there. And it might actually have to do with the fact that they are not very political today. I don't think Israelis are by and large very political in the sense that they're not committed to a particular solution because nothing worked. The right didn't work, the left didn't work, all of their previous conceptions didn't work, nothing worked. And so I think they tend to be a little bit more despondent, if anything. They say, I don't know, whatever. Like, they just want the
I
thing to
mean,
end and they don't know
this is
how.
kind of where we're at in America too. You're just like, okay, well, we tried Barack Obama, that didn't work. We tried Trump, that didn't work. Bush didn't work. Biden didn't work. So what now?
Yeah, I think it's certainly that's what it feels like, certainly with Israelis. And I think there's enormous potential there because they could be open-minded and they could be swayed ideally in directions that are more humanistic than what we've seen in the last few months. That being said, it's also a potential liability because if their minds could be swayed, they could be swayed by more nefarious politicians or by those who have crooked intentions or by those who are just deeply committed to non-humanist agendas.
Yeah, that's why, like I said, it's very important to play on the right emotions, the compassion, the love, rather than the fear.
I I don't
More
know.
if you
I don't
can.
know. I don't know because it's I actually don't think I am skeptical that a message of love and compassion can resonate with anybody in Israel for the next 20 years. It's just not there isn't enough fertile ground in which to sow these seeds. I think that and here's an example. When I speak to Israelis, I never tell them that they need to do XYZ for the Palestinians. It doesn't matter what I don't care about the Palestinians. I'm not saying this for them. I'm not siding with the enemy, right? It's not about them. I'm not expecting you to extend charity to people that are trying to kill you. I'm trying to get you to protect you and your kids. That's my only concern. And what you're doing right now to the Palestinians is making you and your children less safe. I care about you and your children and their safety. And that's a message that I think can work better. I don't know. It might just be like two very
I
different
might be
messages.
a little bit too much of a hippie. That's just there's a little bit of that. But I do think that, like I said, there's something to that argument that I think also isn't stated enough. That, like I said, if you lose that international support, you have, when that Iran attack came down, you had, the U.S., I think Saudi Arabia, Jordan, they were all shooting down missiles that were coming, that way. So,
Yeah.
if you lose that international support and then the refill of the Iron Dome itself or just the regular missiles, not the hypersonics,
So,
it's also hyper reliant on a lot of international partners for parts and,
right.
warheads and things like that. So, like, this isn't a game you want to play, too crazy. Because, like I said, this is the problem with, like, okay, like, think about Japan during World War II. Like, if you really want to be honest and look at this and kind of zoom out from a strategic stance, if Japan didn't attack the U.S. in World War II, Axis might have won. A large portion of their fuel and and things like that they were getting was coming from the U.S. and they knew once they hit us, it was cut off. So and I know that we were starting to
You mean cut
signal that
off
we
to the
were talking.
Japanese? You're saying to the
Correct. We were
Japanese?
talking about sanctioning them currently, and that's part of the excuse they used to bomb them.
Yeah, no. So
But
I
from what
think
I
they already
understand,
stopped. Yeah, sorry.
we were still giving them oil, and that really made sure that we shut them off. And like I said, there is an argument because it was a contentious debate that we shouldn't shut it off because it's a huge amount of money. But Britain wanted us to shut it off because they were involved in the war.
No, and I think
But
the public wanted us to shut it off because of the atrocities in China.
and that, of course, yeah, the
But
old.
I think that so when I speak to Israelis, it's very interesting because they like reliably think that the reason the rest of the world is against them is for cynical or confused reasons, or by and large for anti-Semitic reasons. How much do you think anti-Semitism plays into the world's reaction after October 7th?
I think anti-Semitism is not a fake monster. But I
Mm,
think the best quote that I can give you that is from a gentleman that a lot of people don't like, but he said that paranoia doesn't mean that they're not. It doesn't mean that there isn't anyone out to get you.
yeah.
Just like just because or no, he said, everyone's heard the saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And then there's the reverse of that, which is just because they're out to get you doesn't mean you're not being paranoid.
Mm,
And there's something to the reaction of of a paranoid person that breeds more resentment. So it actually causes the reaction is actually causing a lot more of the problem you're trying to avoid, if that makes any sense.
yeah, so
So
you think it's overblown in a way that is ultimately to the detriment of the Jewish people.
well, like I said, it's that's not always the case. It depends on who we're talking about. I think an example, what's a good example? Okay, the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing,
Mm,
right? So if you look at the Black Lives Matter and the All Lives Matter saying, the first handful of times All Lives Matter was said, it was literally right after Black Lives Matter. It was said in like a cadence of Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, in a way of saying, like, look, we need to treat everyone as a equal human being and police shouldn't be shooting people.
mm.
And this was a good way for people to cause this wedge in where it pushed this terminology and wedged these two groups that would have probably unified against police violence to making this only a race issue. And so because you have this paranoia about race, you alienated a huge portion of individuals who otherwise would have been right there with you ending the problem. Does that make sense? Now,
Yes,
it's
so
not
you
to say
think
that everybody who said all lives matter or white lives matter, or not to say that everybody who said that wasn't on the same page that you're saying they were on, but the majority, especially in the beginning, were not on that page. And by freaking out about that, you actually alienated people who would have unified behind your cause.
so, Honey Badger, let me then
Does
ask
that make
you,
sense?
let me ask you very, very succinctly then. When I speak to Israelis who say the reason the world is boiling over with hatred to Israel is because of anti-Semitism, what do I say? What would be your line on that?
I would say that it's not, like, again, it's not directly caused. I do think there is anti-Semitism, though. I don't think that you can ignore that. You know, but it's just kind of like, another way to put this would be if Japan was doing a bunch of crazy stuff right now, right? And we went to a Japan protest. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Would the anti-Asian racists show up? Of course they would. You know what I'm saying? So
But you don't
is a
think it's the
portion of
primary
that
driver. It's
correct?
you
I
don't
don't
think,
think it's the primary driver, but I do
how much
think
of
that
a
it's being
driver do you
made
think it
worse.
is? Yeah, how much of a driver? Is it at 10%, 20%,
Maybe
90%? How much?
maybe 20%,
Maybe 20%.
but I do think it is growing. I would
It's
argue
funny.
that that
Actually, I
is
think
growing.
yesterday I had a conversation with someone and I said 20%. Yeah.
But I think it's growing. I do. And like I said, I think it's growing in a reaction to this kind of like, there's something to, if you're just going to call me a racist anyway, then fuck it.
We see that on the in
You
the
know what I mean?
community a little bit. Do you hear some people in the community? It manifests there, I think, just as much.
There's something to that. If you're just going to call me a racist, then fuck it, I'm a racist. That's kind of the mentality.
Yeah. So, are you hopeful now that you've spoken to many Israelis and Palestinians? Are you hopeful? Like, do you see the ability to change mind? You said that that's the thing, just to bring it back to the top. You're interested in mind changing. Do you think that the conditions are there right now for minds to be changed? And if so, in what direction do you think the minds should be changed?
Well, I'm always more of a we need to change people's mind to be, like as you would refer to it as humanist, but I would just say respecting people as individuals with their own unique rights and their own unique interests. And we have to realize that like we have this weird need for everyone to like the things that we like, want to do the things that we do. And this is not even just a political thing, but we have to realize that the world takes all kinds of people.
Mm,
And if everybody paid as much attention to, politics as I do, or as AI as you do, or any given topic, if everyone paid as much attention as we did, then
mm.
we'd all starve to death. It's something I've said numerous times on the podcast. This is like, that to me is my job, is to try to go out there and find this information and to try to distill it down so you don't have to do that work, because everyone else has. I need somebody to go out there and plant the vegetables so I can eat tomorrow,
Honey Badger, what would you wish? We started right from the beginning, I think before we hit record, talking about children. One day I was reading this, who was it? It was like a Renaissance thinker. Um Mirandola, Pico della Mirandola, I think. And you just read so much excitement in how he was talking about the future and reason and rationality and technology. And oh my God, the world can provide an abundance and freedom, like so much enthusiasm. And you don't really see that today. It's very rare for us to, I think it's just mostly gloom and fear and anxiety. What are you hopeful for your
That's
children?
exactly it. It's the children, man. I think we as adults, as good as we change our minds, and I know, and I'm not discounting your beautiful work there. I think there is something to the groundwork that's laid. And the children are going to be the ones that are going to be able to move past a lot of these preconceived notions a lot better than we ever will. And I think that that's like a primary goal. And there's one thing I could broadcast to everybody about their children. It's something I've said numerous times, is like there is something to, number one, intentionally raising your children. Like plan it out, think about what you're doing, think about what, corrections that you're using, what kind of style that you're using, and how this is going to affect them later in life, and how it's going to set up you and their relationship so that way you can raise them in a more efficient manner for both of you involved.
Mm.
And it's something that a lot of people don't seem to think about. Like it's just a very in the moment parenting. And I think that when you lengthen out that time preference and you're a lot more intentional, you start to take different measures and different actions and better actions that you see a lot better results out of. And the second thing I would say is remember when you were a child and think back to which adults you actually respected. And who was that? It's the ones that treated you like what you had to say mattered. This is something that I think, take this with a grain of salt if you want to, but you can use this in your thing. I think way more than people want to be right, they want to be understood.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think that stems back to not being taken seriously as a child, and now when you're not taken seriously, you feel like you're being treated as a child. And it's a like, for lack of a better word, trigger.
it's infantilizing.
So like I think we all want to be taken seriously to an extent, and then I think especially men and boys as well need to feel like they have a purpose and they're useful. So, I mean, not to say they don't do this with girls as well, but if your kid wants to help, you should encourage that to where they always want to help because it will make them feel good and make them feel like they're more important and more useful. And even if they're not really helping all that much.
What do you make of the educational systems that we have, that we push children through? Are you, yeah, have you developed any thoughts about this after having had children? Or have those been thoughts, if any, that kind of like coalesced over an even longer period?
A lot longer period. I am insanely against public school. I think that there are a million different reasons that I could go into.
We'll do
I don't
another
think the
episode.
teachers,
We'll do
yeah,
another
that
episode.
that that we could I would love to have you back and we can have a hour-long conversation about my belief in the public school system and why I'm homeschooling. But to keep it short and simple, I don't want my kids indoctrinated or shot. So I'm gonna homeschool.
Did you have that feeling
Uh,
even when you were going through school, or is that something that hit
the
you after?
shot part, no, but the indoctrination part, yes. Like I really did uh point out that, like, they weren't teaching us anything.
Hmm.
Like the whole time I was in school, I was like, I'm 3 chapters ahead of whatever you're teaching. I'm gonna go learn on my own because this is boring, and it's such a slow pace too for someone who actually has, I guess a higher IQ would be the argument. And I don't mean from like being smarter. I just mean that I learn easier than some people.
Hmm.
So like for me, it just was such a slow pace that it was boring. And I think it held me back. And the only reason I got as far as I did was because like I said, self study. And I think that we should spend a lot more time teaching kids how to learn and then sending them into the knowledge rather than teaching them what to learn.
Okay, let's put a pin on that and then come back to it. The project that, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but the project that we're working on now is transmogrifying into much more of a, like a track based, like very educational kind of space. And I believe there's just so much innovation that is very likely to come around now with AI in the educational space. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And it's raising our kids and then and making sure that we're providing the right software in their brains.
Well, it's something that I'm kind of thinking too in the modern age. Like wouldn't, even if we were going to do schooling, like wouldn't the smartest way to do this be like the best teachers in the nation, the 40 best teachers in the nation have curriculums that they're uploading, on YouTube, and that's who's teaching our kids, not, thousands of subpar teachers who are telling you to read a book and then answer the questions at the end of the chapter.
Yeah, I think that the world is going to be even more radical than that. It's just the most
So
patient educator in your pocket.
we can forward into that because I actually do uh hella agree with the idea of AI being a teacher. Just the chat apps, I personally learned so much. I have taught mine to source everything and cite everything. So while, you can't really trust to give you exact, reading, sometimes it's a little bit off.
Right.
I just click that citation, and it's like Google on steroids.
It's wild. Nice. Honey Badger. Let's do another episode then about that one at some point if you'd like.
Definitely.
Nice.
Definitely.
This was fun, man. This was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was good talking to you. I appreciate you coming.
Honey Badger, anytime. Next time, will we get to listen to you play on the guitar, a ukulele? I can tell from here.
I got a guitar, a mandolin, that's a parlor
Mandolin.
size, and then that one there is a electric 12 string.
Oh, nice. All right. Next time you'll do
That's
a
just a
little.
couple of my guitars.
You got some more? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got like 12.
Uh, Honey Badger, thanks for having me, man.
No, thank you. I appreciate you coming.
Of course, brother.